urban resilience. For far too long, decision-making on climate adaptation has been dominated purely by orthodox, traditional, top-down, expert-led climate science, which is critical, but is not enough for us to make sense of where we need to go to solve the climate crisis, where we need to go to ensure a climate-resilient world. Studying people's perceptions of climate change is really essential for fostering equitable climate action. Understanding perceptions is also crucial vis-a-vis adaptation, because how people perceive climate impacts really influences the trajectories that they adopt to adapt to a changing climate. First, we're going to all get up for a minute, please, if that's okay. And we're going to form a continuum where we're going to move across the, Tom, what are we doing? We're forming a spectrum or moving across the room?
A spectrum from, at the screen here, if you associate more closely with hard science, physical science, orthodox science. So, you know, Reinhard can lead the way. No. No, the association, you know, obviously we haven't got any, like, land scale, you know, atmospheric modelers here, but we do have, you know, people who are more model-oriented. And then at the window over there, those who work actually on perceptions and what people think. And yeah, let's see where we go. We put ourselves somewhere in the middle. If you're a social scientist doing, huh? Yeah, the middle ground. So a spectrum, social science who, you know, work with modelers, but also try and do grounded surveys. You can stand in the middle. If you're entirely with people on the ground, looking and asking what they think, middle ground. Also, it's going to be about your whole career as well. So if you have a background in physical science and now you're working with local on the ground. Yeah. This is yeah, it's fine. No, it's fine. You don't mean a line. It's about how far from the wall, how far from the... No, spectrum. Okay, I'm going to start with interviewing a few people down here. What's your name and where do you come from?
My name is Josephine. I come from Kenya.
And you're working on the ground?
Yes.
Entirely? You're almost the window.
I'm both on the ground and also in admin.
Little above. Okay. Yeah. Fantastic. Who's actually in the window? Who thinks themselves? You guys. What's your name? Where do you come from?
I'm Doris from Kenya.
Welcome.
I'm the grassroots woman. If you come to the community, I'm that person on the ground. Yeah.
You're outside the window, maybe. You're like right there.
But we also do data collection, but community-led data.
That's it. It doesn't. This is exactly the idea of this session, is that this is science, this is data, but it's a different way of thinking about that data. Because what we are used to is this kind of middle ground of social scientists in the middle. Who'd like to say hello?
Thanks. My name is Nivedita and I represent Gorakhpur Environmental Action Group. So we do work, like we do secondary data analysis also. We work on climate data, you know, whatever is available at the secondary source. We analyze all of that. But we also do ground truthing of that data with community perceptions and community data. So it's sort of a mix of both, yeah.
Awesome. So we've got some experience in the room. That's excellent. Moving through. What's your name? Where do you come from?
Hi, my name is Pani. I am a PhD student from the University of Oxford, and I'm currently my research is basically working with climate scientists and the users on the river basin organizations to really kind of find how do you kind of communicate climate science into decision. So like I'm mapping about how to work with climate scientists, how do you use the data into decision-making context. So yeah.
And you work with the climate center.
And I also work in climate center in the seasonal forecast related activities.
Get their adverts in. Okay, let's hear some from those hard scientists. No. That's fairly hard. Yeah, it's true. But you're saying, you know, you're a bit socially minded.
I listen to the decision makers. What do they need? What do they want? What are the motivation? What are their challenges?
Okay.
How do you kind of connect to the climate scientists and the data itself? So yeah.
can do hard science and be policy-oriented, policy-led. Reinhard.
Yeah, Reinhard Bechler. I work for the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, right? Yeah. Tom, confession, yeah. So I'm also a social scientist. So I'm an ecological economist by training. So started working on insurance and stuff, but now moved quite a bit forward to loss and damage and trying to understand what does it mean on the ground and what can practice and policy and practice do for that. Maybe hard or not, I don't like that distinction, but it's a good one to get us organized. But yeah, thanks.
All right, we won't spend all day doing this. Thank you for all standing, but the whole point, I guess, of this session is that we're going to share some experiences with each other, starting with a few pointers by some mini plays that we're going to act out of experiences we've had working on perceptions data. The source of the problem comes in, if you look in academic journals, there are so many articles about surveys of farmers' perceptions of climate change. There is very little about what to do with that data. How do you use that sort of data meaningfully to inform action? So we've got 4 kind of challenge areas, 4 spheres of action that we're going to act out little examples of, and then we're going to have discussions at the table to share your experiences and learning, and hopefully try and piece together some examples from around the world of how perceptions data can be made more useful in different contexts. Sound good? All right.
Just a provocative question out of the box, even if it's not that true. Are hard science gender biased? Because the majority of men are there.
That's good. We were.
I don't know if it's not representative.
No, it was biased because by 2 people coming in the room who didn't put themselves in. They just stood at the end. Yeah. Well, the 2 who actually plugged themselves. You should be in the intersectionality room. Oh, that's next.
Tom, I've told them that we've spent years practicing these skits.
These what?
Spent years practicing these skits.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So, Anette, will you please join us for skit number 1? So these are all real-life scenarios that we've been involved with, working on studies of perception, subjectivity, but it may not be entirely true to what actually happened in the real world. The important bit of interaction here is that at some point I'll show this sign, and then we all have to freeze as actors, and it's the first one to move is out. No, So, I do. Okay. Right, let's explore our first scenario. It's me first. This was based on a genuine debate we had, Aditya and I, following a survey that the government of Nepal had commissioned. They did a national scale survey of perceptions of climate change. Pretty representative sample. It was done by the statistical office of the government of Nepal. It is a phenomenal data set. And they came to Aditya, who was working on a big program in South Asia, and said, please can you help us with what to do with this data? Because we've got all this data that we commissioned. That's what statisticians like to do. Get the data. And then like, and now? So, genuine. First, we're going to hear from physical scientists, which I will play. And as was pointed out by my esteemed colleague, we saw the end of the spectrum was very male-dominated. The other end of the spectrum, very female-dominated. So, that's appropriate. And so the interaction was between a physical scientist, a social scientist, and a farmer. Physical scientist. Let's be absolutely clear. Climate change is a global physical process. What people on the ground need to understand, this isn't just crazy weather for them. It's set within this context of a global change. So as a physical scientist, we're actually best placed to inform others on those impacts. You need to understand the complex relationships between changing precipitation, temperature, and the atmospheric concentrations of CO2. That's what affects productivity of crops. So our studies can show those projected changes and allow farmers and policymakers to make adaptive changes accordingly. What do you think, social scientist?
Well, speaking as a social scientist, I understand the importance of physical sciences, But you seem to think that your research evidence is without bias. I note that your studies all focus on crops most relevant to Western countries and irrigated, market-oriented crops. But what about those crops that are not part of market mechanisms? How about our cauliflower in Nepal or our green leafy greens, you know? You're excluding huge numbers of farmers on the ground in Nepal in your analysis. As a social scientist, we can ensure that research focuses on the most vulnerable, those farmers that need their voice to be translated into this data, and marginalized farming communities, don't you think? Social scientist point of view.
I'm the farmer. This is all bullshit. I don't know what you guys are arguing about. You keep banging on about CO2 and precipitation and rainfall and yada, yada, yada. You keep talking about bias in Western countries and this and that. No one's spoken to me, right? Have you asked me what matters to me? Aren't you talking about my life and livelihoods? What about my perception about what matters?
What does matter?
To me, what's most important is none of the things you're talking about. Windstorms. I'm most worried about windstorms. Does that figure in any of the policies that the hard scientists and social scientists have fed into? Have you done a social scientific study of the impacts of windstorms?
Okay. There's the first scenario. Genuinely what happened. What this survey showed us was that windstorms and changes in wind direction and intensity were what really mattered to farmers. And that wasn't being studied by the Met Office or models or even kind of in the awareness of the policy making, which is always this, rising temperatures, rising, the IPCC data. So that is the first scenario. It's about the use of perceptions and subjective perceptions data to inform our understanding of climate impacts. And what we'd like you to do is on each table is to have a conversation about how, if that rings true with you, and in your experience, how do different people and groups perceive climate impacts differently? That's a kind of guide question. And your experience of how those perceptions differ across different groups, social characteristics, think intersectionally, think geographically, think livelihoods differences. And then, if there's time, how have you actually dealt with those differences in your work? So how do you understand those things and what your experience of that is, and how you've dealt with them? We've got 10 minutes, so it's going to be fairly rapid. Please someone who's a genius, make a few notes on Post-it notes to capture this, not too long. Someone who's good at making notes and summarizing, because we want to capture this later on a Jamboard. We won't do it live. So please, quick, and also with the facilitation, try and make sure everyone gets to talk. So keep your interventions short, and if you want to create another table, by all means do. You got enough? Yeah? Okay. 10 minutes. I'll put those questions up so you... It's not working. Time's up, people. Thanks, everyone. There's lots more time, don't worry. Lots more time for talking. We've even got like a blank bit at the end to make sure we wrap up any loose ends and talk to people we haven't talked to. What we would like to do, however, is make sure you don't talk to the same people again. So I'm going to number you off and we're going to change tables each time. I hope we don't get around back to the same again. We might do. But if I say 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, no, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, Christian, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. Remember what your number is? Ones, come here. Twos go here, threes go here, please. Such a school teacher. That's it. Anyone who gets to stay is very pleased with himself. This table feels a bit very busy. No? Nice. Please, if you're a 1, please come here. It's fine. It's fine. This is a 2, 4, 6. 2, 4, 6, 7. Yes, that's right. Already. Yeah, maybe. Is that okay? Oh, it's a bit busy. Anete, where's she gone? Anete. Te necesitamos. Scenario 2, right?
All right, adaptation actions.
This is scenario 2 on adaptation action, skit 2.
All right, let's move on to another scenario. This comes from a real-life example close to my working life. So let's watch the action as an urban government adaptation policymaker engages with a worker for the fabulous Red Cross Climate Center.
Red Crescent Climate Center. We've just done an incredible report where we have spoken with vulnerable communities in cities across 7 countries. This is actually a true report that we're doing. Sorry for the plug. And we'd love to talk to you about our findings to make sure that you can embed those findings in the decisions that you're taking about how to develop the city that you're in charge of.
Sounds interesting. I'd like to hear more. From my perspective, as someone who has to design the adaptation projects to make the city more resilient, I need robust scientific evidence. I'll be the one who's blamed for maladaptation if I get this wrong. If you just go and ask people what they think, some people might think one thing, some people might think something else. I kind of need the robust objective evidence, and that's why we have a national meteorological service. They can show us those temperatures. You'd be amazed at the granularity of the detail of the data that they have on the heat waves. And they've got the projections from the climate models to show us how those are going to change. And that's kind of how I need to base my evidence, because it's on me, right? If I'm responsible, if I get this wrong, so that evidence needs to be robust.
Sir, I do understand what you're saying. I'm not saying ignore your National Meteorological Service and what it's telling you. However, I do want to say that the data that we have is robust, can be depended on, is absolutely valid. And unless you understand what the Met Service is telling you in the context of what we are telling you, you will always make a plan that will never quite have the impact that you want to. For instance, our data will actually, the National Met Service will only tell you how heat will impact the whole city, whereas we and our data is going to tell you how different people feel the heat and what they do during heat waves to adapt to these heat waves. And that is an insight that your meteorological data does not provide. So you have to use that data, but you need to combine it with our data. It's not just people's opinions.
okay, you can come show me your report in 2 months' time.
Perhaps some of this rings true to you, or with you. With the others at your table, I invite you to consider the following questions. Following questions, groups. Number one, how can perceptions data inform the design of different adaptation actions? Don't go so far to build your adaptation actions. Just think through how can perceptions data inform the design of different adaptation actions. That's question number one. And question number two, how have you reconciled scientific model data with grounded perceptions? Need a repeat? All right. Question number one. Question number one, how can perceptions data inform the design of different adaptation actions? Again, don't be high achievers, don't go into adaptation actions and start designing, just think how can perceptions data inform the design? And question number two, how have you reconciled scientific model data with grounded perceptions? Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. How many minutes? 10 minutes. Let's go. Questions away?
Gentle way of bringing people down. Yeah. Bringing it to a close. Gently. Here we go. Okay. Can't stop it beeping. Stop. Plenty more to talk through. This could go on all day. We've got more space at the end as well to pitch in more things. We're going to move on to the next scenario. We're going to mix you up again. I'm just trying to work out if I do the same thing again, will everyone end up in the same?
Yes, of course they will. But you have to number them off again.
Yeah, I know. I number them differently. You should split again, all right? You won't just go back. A, B, C, that'll do it. That's it. Instead of 1, 2, 3. Got it. Okay, so we'll do it again. A, B, C, 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 A, B. A's, B's, C's. Dr. Howlett never gets to move. It's an old father time. Just sits in the same chair.
All right, guys. Yeah, take a second to say hello to your fellow table mates. But, yes, what? The next scenario tackles the context of measuring and tracking adaptation and resilience, where we find ourselves in a boardroom at the United Nations in New York with a highly regarded statistician and a leading mind on resilience, pondering the difficulties of tackling the thorny issue of measurement.
I'm being the statistician, it seems. So, we at this boardroom, the great and good of the statistical community, we've been challenged to develop a resilience measurement framework. Sound familiar? Everyone's been there. This is what the UN agencies are going to use to measure resilience. It's going to be, everyone's going to use the same framework and have results frames in the same way. Imagine that. It's our job as statisticians to work this out. It's a hard job. We've got to come up with something, and we've got a lot of data to play with. So, let's start with somewhere where we know we've got a lot of good time series data over a long period of time. It's quite granular. We're going to start playing with how we could do this for East Africa and the Horn of Africa. And what we know is, we've got crunched all the numbers on child stunting, malnutrition, whether kids are in school or not, and we have correlated with our amazing multiple regression all the climate shocks and how they show in these time series of childhood stunting, childhood nutrition, and whether children are in school. These are genius. We've got this data. It's quite granular. All the countries collect it in the same way. These are our indicators for measuring resilience. Job done.
All right, Tom, the statistician. But why do you think those metrics will relate to the realities of people that people face? And what if those correlations are due to other factors? Then you risk measuring the wrong this and taking the wrong actions as a result. Why not ask people to rate their own resilience? We don't have to go to door anymore. Wake up to the mobile phone generation, granddad. Through the Braced project, we work with the market research companies who regularly send our service via the cell phone network in Kenya. People are encouraged to respond via their phone in return for a small top-up payment. The response rate is super fast, and these days even captures those who live in really, really remote areas. This perception-based service should be how we determine progress on resilience. Take that.
Why does he freeze? We have to open our mouths. Why not?
So for the next 10 minutes, these are your two questions. What is your experience with measuring resilience? And how could you capture what people themselves consider makes them more resilient and adaptive, and think beyond, okay, let's just do a workshop with the community when the evaluation team comes to town. So 2 questions, your experience with measuring resilience, and then how could you integrate perceptions and subjective data better in resilience measurement? And we have 10 minutes for this, starting now. Sorry. How could you capture what people themselves consider makes them more resilient and adaptive? And Tom is writing it on the whiteboard as well. All right, that was a very exciting conversation on our table, at least one eureka moment, and an agreement to follow up after for a cross-learning on particular methodologies. All right, so I'm going to narrate and you're educator too. All right, so now we come to our fourth scenario, which is on communicating impacts and adaptation. And this scenario really tackles the context of communication and learning. And here we're going to listen to an interaction between 2 educators. The first one is acting the role of a professor of climate change from a university in the global north. And that's going to be played by Professor Tom Tanner from SOAS of London University. And the other is the communications lead for an environmental outreach organization in the Caribbean.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm cast in my own role. So climate change, as we know, is one of the biggest challenges facing humanity and the health of our planet. Humanity depends on that planetary health. And we need to communicate this desperately. The global nature of the crisis, we need to connect with people, and we need to appeal to them to promote global action on climate. And as an educator, it's my role to use that, using iconic symbols of this global change that people can really get behind. And nowhere is that more iconic than the polar bear sitting on the melting ice. We love it. It inspires us all to take action. Oh no, oh, it's got a little baby with it. Oh, okay. That's how we're gonna roll with that flagship icon.
Of course, Professor, the polar bears are going to speak very loud to people in Jamaica. It really speaks about their lived experience. It will be like expecting those in the Arctic to feel automatically connected to coral bleaching. What we actually need is some understanding of how people perceive changing climate as linked to their daily lives. And then we can build on that to make global climate change real to all of them. Global science can only be given meaning by studying subjective perceptions of change.
Please. All right. So yes, feel free to give our performers a round of applause. Maybe you've experienced this personally, bizarre ideas of how communication needs to be, on climate change needs to be transmitted, the symbols that are being used. So the questions for the next 10 minutes are, have you ever felt disconnected from the way that climate change is presented as a problem?
Every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, do any of you have experience of grounding the climate change problem in local realities and in people's perceptions of weather and climate? So have you felt alienated by the charts and the graphs and the polar bears and all the complicated scientific terms or other things? And then have you, in your experience, tried to convert this into more relatable language that might be informed by how people perceive the climate problem?
Popcorn Eureka moments. I think we should have a big everyone cheering and clapping at the end, so we make the big rooms look rubbish.
Oh yeah, but you make them do
I'll do
that.
that.
Should we do? Okay.
Whooping, cheering, getting louder and louder, and then quiet and quiet, and then louder and louder. Yeah.
Okay.
Something like that.
Yeah. And
Should we do that first?
energizer.
Should we do that first?
Yeah, do it because they all do.
Okay, everybody. I will. I'll go now. Okay, everyone. Let's draw it to a close. There, we've got 5 minutes before the end of the session. Final one. Jesse Di Maria Kini. Okay, we've got 5 minutes. We're going to do a few popcorn eureka moments just to end. But before we do, one of the important things for these events is that you've all had a good time. Have you enjoyed it? Yes. Can I get a yeah? Yes. Let's make everyone else think their sessions are rubbish. Let's have a round of applause that gets gradually louder and louder. Whooping. Down and down. Keep going. Just quietly. Up again. Final whooping.
Thanks for that, Tom. Nice to end the session on a high note. Okay, let's have we don't want a formal report back, that's the worst thing. What we're going to do is just raise your hand talk about one interesting thing that you heard, or you're going to take back. And please, someone break the silence of death by not making me wait. Short and sweet, maybe 30 seconds, 45 seconds. Who's the first to go? First to go, first to go, first to go. Go, Himanshu.
You caught me. Thanks a lot, Aditya. And it is the power of narrative and storytelling for community engagement. The power of narratives and engaging with communities and creating stories together for understanding and measuring resilience, that has been phenomenal. That is what I learned today.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Who else? Who else? Who else? Who else?
The language of climate and resilience is very important in how we communicate when we communicate with farmers or with marginalized communities. They don't understand 1.5 degrees or glacier melting. We have to tell them what climate change, how it is impacting them in their own livelihoods and in their own language.
Thank you. Another key insight.
Thank you. As social psychologist, I feel as a minority in humanitarian work, because looking for immediate solution, I understand to respond to needs, but then it's important also to work on the aspects that have been raised today, so I feel empowered.
Great, 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 great. One more. What have you gained? What have you gained from the session?
Aditya, Tom, and Anna are great actors.
That is a lie and you know it. Okay, I'm going to pick on the lady in the red jacket. Tell us about the snakes and ladders moment.
Oh, I love that. It's about getting people's data, but through games, you know? And so people are able to talk more freely without feeling like we are collecting any data. Thank you, thank you.
Great, one or two more. What have you learned? Reinhard.
It's a lot to talk about climate urgency, but how to translate it and how to make it relevant for understanding what's happening on the ground and how to take actions. I learned a lot, and there's a lot of stuff that we can build on. So it was great, this session, yeah.
Amazing. We'll take a last one.
I also learned that we also need optimism in terms of communicating the climate change and information. As a young generation, we are already living with a lot of anxiety of what's going to come next. But when we are really communicating, we really need a bit of hope and a bit of like optimism, really looking forward. And then we kind of talk about it in our group as well. So we need optimism in communication as well.
What a fantastic note to end on. Thank you very much. And I'm delighted to say we're ending the session on time. Amazing. Thank you.